Welcome to Allies or Enemies. I'm Jess.
And I am Sean, and today we are talking about Nucleum, which is designed by Simone, Luciani, and David Turczi, and is published by Board&Dice, who did supply us with this review copy, but the thoughts in this video are all our own.
And in Nucleum, you are trying to power Europe. So you are building buildings and building out your network and using uranium to primarily try and energize those buildings.
And it is a heavy, thinky game, but let's get back to talking about that after we just do a very brief how this plays. In Nucleum, players will be building and powering Europe. It's a fairly heavy game, but at its core, players will spend most turns playing an action tile and then taking the actions on that tile. These can be played either on the board to expand your network and gain route building bonuses, or above your player board, which can also increase your income and allow you to complete contracts. Generally, these tiles will provide you with one of 6 key types of actions. Urbanize, which lets you add buildings to the map. Industrialize, which lets you add mines and turbines, which help you power those buildings. Energize, which lets you power up your buildings, gaining achievement tokens, technologies, income, and points. Develop, which gains you more action tiles. Contract, which gets you contracts that you can fulfill through the game, which again gain you lots of good stuff. And subsidize, which gains workers or resources or increases your income. Or players can instead choose to take a recharge action, which gets all of your income, gets your tiles back, and lets you place all the achievement tokens you've gained since your last recharge on the milestone track, which opens up opportunities for big endgame scoring. As the game progresses, players will begin to complete some of the 5 endgame conditions: emptying the contracts, emptying the action tiles, scoring 70 plus points, building all of their technologies, or placing out the final milestone marker. And once 2 or 3 in a 2-player game of these conditions are met, there is one last turn, and then all the points from milestones, ultimate technologies, income, energized buildings, and your leftover stuff is added together, and the leader of the new industrial revolution is named.
So that was a really brief overview of how it plays, but there is a lot more to it than that. This is a very heavy game. I think it took me 3 plays before I really had a strong grasp of what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah, this is I've played it 5 times now, including one solo play, and I think this last time that we played it, we just kind of zipped through it. Like, we knew exactly what we were doing, we saw the different strategies, but it really, like, the first play of this, I think both of us were, in the rule book, a lot of it, we really weren't sure. At first, when I read the rules, I thought, is this going to be like Brass Birmingham? And now, by like the 4th or 5th play, it's like, I barely even see the comparison anymore. It's obvious when you first read that rule book, like, why a lot of people are going to think that, but boy, is it ever different.
Yeah, and I think when you look down on your player board and you see the columns of the buildings and that they have the 2 sides that you have to use energy to switch, that really felt Brass-like. But how you're doing that is totally different with like the action tiles and everything, so it has a very different feel. But it is interesting because your first couple of games, you can really dig yourself into a corner that's really difficult to get out of, because you use your action tiles to also build your network. And my first game, I built a really big network and I got rid of like all kinds of actions. And there is this one tile that makes sure that you can always do any of the actions, but you can only do one action. So if you have if you're really stuck, you can always do something, but it can take you a while to build back up again.
Yeah, this is really, in your first game is a learning game. Like, do not feel like you are going to be at all competitive, especially if you're playing with someone who's played this already, but do not feel like you need to play well in that first game. The first game, 100% learning. Even your second game is like, okay, now I got to grasp on the rules, but how do I play it? Because there's a lot of strategy in when you are putting these little action tiles down on the board as railroads. because it's really strong to do that, to connect up two towns together, to build out your network, to make these open to build next to, but you can never use this again. That's it. That is, you're done. So every time you put one of those down, that's a tile you can never use, and that's an action that's fully out of your hand. And I really like that your action tiles are also your railway tiles. It feels like a tiny smidge like Space Station Phoenix, how when you pull apart your ship, you're losing those action tiles, but you kind of need to do it in order to win the game. This has a little bit of that. And I really like that like diminishing your actions, or you can just build them right up, because there's a lot of different ways to play this.
Yeah, when there was a game when I thought, well, because you can do the actions when you put the tile down if the colors match, maybe I just need to do that and build all kinds of tiles, and I'll always get the chance to do the actions, but then you're not getting the income. So it really is this push-pull of which one you spend and when you spend it, and what everybody else is doing as well, because you might want to make sure your network continues in a certain direction that someone might get in the way of.
Yeah, because you need that network for the government buildings, I think they're called. Those score based on your network, and those can get you a lot of points, so they're worthwhile. But you're right, like putting them on your board, when you actually play the actions like an action tile instead of a railway tile, that is the only time that you can fulfill contracts. And that builds up because you can only get income from the last action tile you've placed above that board. So you need to put, at least 4 or 5 of those out so that you can get a decent income, because you need to have stuff going in so it can go out. So there is oodles of stuff to think about here. And I guess that brings us to the replayability. And this is like brimming with replayability.
Yeah, it certainly is. There are all kinds of things that switch. In terms of as a player, there are 4 different technology boards. And so when you first play, I didn't really notice the difference between them, but now you can certainly feel the difference. Some of them are almost pushing you in certain directions than others. For the action tiles, because you're continually gaining more and more, and you're switching them out because some of them you're playing on the board, that too is going to change how you play the game and the replayability. So it's really interesting that the types of action and strengths of action is going to be so different each game. There's also all kinds of changes when it comes to the contracts. Only a certain number of contracts come out, and those are worth different amounts for the different types of things you're doing. The end game goals, and so whenever you're able to, like, you do the recharge action, you could put a star out, it's often going to tie to a scoring condition, so that's going to be different too. And in a 2-player game, one of the biggest differences is the fact that some of the spaces get blocked, and there is a green cube that starts off at a certain space, so where you're starting is going to change entirely.
Yeah, so in this game, this is actually, we took a few things off the board, but this is pretty much where we ended up in our last game. And you can see that, well, maybe you can't see, but a couple of the cities actually just got blocked off this game. And that can happen. Or, like, we can only put one building in somewhere. And this was like a key city. So in this game, there's a central city that's pretty much blocked off, but we still have to build routes through there in order to get our uranium to other places. So this game played very differently, and this time we actually kind of ended up on different sides of the board as well, whereas usually we're really smushed together. And that actually brings us a bit to the player count as well, because you've only played this at 2 players. I've played it a bit at solo as well, but how did you feel like it works as a 2-player game?
Yeah, I think it works really well as a 2-player game. There is one side of the board is just for 1 or 2 players. So it means that there's like fewer cities and fewer of the railway connections and everything as well. And like we said, some of the spots get filled already at the very beginning of the game. So it keeps it really tight. And often we're very much in each other's way, and like filling up together the different cities and really having to almost go around somebody else to still keep our own network going. So it is really tight. And our most recent play took us just over an hour, which is the kind of length that I really like.
And we were playing at like super speed in that game, I feel like. I think it's going to take most folks like an hour and a half-ish, even with 2 players. And if you got AP, this is going to take a little while. And I would say that for heavier games, we prefer to play it 2, because neither of us
you're more patient than I am, I think, for sure. But we do like to play with each other because we both tend to play fairly quickly. And at 2 players with a heavy game, you don't have that waiting that you've got. In this one, you could have a little bit longer. And that might be the case in a 3 or 4 player game. But like we said, we hadn't tried that yet. But I did try the solo game. And it works really solid. So you've got like a full-fledged bot opponent that you're playing against that just runs basically how the game plays. So they've got like a line of action tiles and you roll the dice and that decides what action tile they're going to do. And then they make generally fairly sensible decisions and just do all of the things that you would generally do. And the nice thing about it is I actually learned a bit more how to play the game from how clever the bot plays, because it's like it won't use an action or won't spend an action tile on a railway unless it has another tile with that action. And it's just got several things like that I'm like, oh yeah, that's sensible. We should play like that. And it is very competitive. So I beat it in the one time I played, but I had to get just over 200 points and it scored like 198 or something. So it is not a pushover, and that was at the easy level, and you can make that harder too. But it is a lot of work and a lot of running. So you got to think of like, I would probably prefer to play this game 2 or 3 times before I tackled the bot, because it's like learning another game. And this is already a lot of learning for this game. So another thing we should talk about is the components. What do you think about the components of the package of this game?
Yeah, I think it looks really good. I love that these power plants are 3-dimensional, and the little uranium here, the whatever it's meant to be, it slots in very nicely. All of the wooden bits are really lovely. So the screen printed turbines and how everything fits into the dual layer player board works really well. And even just like the meeples have these little hats and stuff.
I love their little hats. Yeah.
And everything's really clear. So in terms of the iconography,
there's just a few weird little kind of readability issues. Like there's just some color blindness issues that I read that a few people had problems with, and then I can definitely see that because there are pluses or minuses, and there's green minuses, which means it costs less, and red minuses, which means that you get less or that it actually costs more. But because they're green and red, the most common color blindness problem, it's very easy for a lot of folks to get those mixed up. So if you have color blindness, that is a couple things to kind of think about. But for the most part, I do think this is beautiful. And I love the 3D-ness of this and all the stuff. Their hats are so great. I really like them.
So that leads us to who do we think it's for? And this is definitely a heavy game. So I would say experienced gamers. It's tight in terms of resource management and everything that you're trying to do. And it can be punishing. You do learn after a couple games what things to avoid to make it less so, but it isn't very forgiving and there's no catch-up mechanic.
Yeah, if anything, there's like a pull ahead mechanic. Like this is not going to hold your hand and be your best friend and like help you out if things aren't going well. It's just going to be like, hey, do it better, dummy. Like this is a game that it asks a lot of you. You're really going to have to be on your toes. You're going to have to both think ahead and then also be ready to throw those plans away sometimes when folks get in your way, or when you realize that you just miscalculated by 1 coin, or when someone gets rid of your coal and now all of a sudden it's going to cost you 3 coins, but it was going to cost you 1 coin, and that means now you can't energize that building, which means you're not going to get this thing and this other thing. And so you've got to be able to throw those plans away and make new plans. But again, you're going to have to be like, okay, what's my next 3 turns look like? And then throw that away if you have to. So you've got to be both strategic and a little bit tactical in this. It's primarily strategy, but there are definitely situations where you got to think and change and, duck and weave a little bit in this game. So you're going to need to be okay with heavy games, and you're going to need to be okay with those setbacks that are going to happen.
Yeah, and those setbacks often tie into what the other players are doing. So there's no take that. There aren't people who are going to be destroying anything that you've built, but they could build in just the perfect spot that you were hoping to. So they will get in the way, particularly, if you know the other player well and what they're going to do, you're going to try and anticipate that. So you have to be okay with getting frustrated and changing gears. But if you are okay with all of that, it is a really interesting puzzle to figure out. And we, in our past few games, we have each done different strategies from ourselves, from what we've done in previous games, and from each other. And it's been so close in all of those games. Like one game I got tons of contracts and was really going heavy on completing those. And then another game I just built in like Praha, where it's everything is worth ×2.
Yeah. Yeah, and all of our games have been between like 3 and 5 points too. So like the game when you just built contracts, I just really focused on my income. And so I got like 60 points out of just building up that income and then coming back as soon as I'd put up my action tiles and scoring these huge income turns. And I was barely building and barely charging stuff up. And that was like 210 points or something that game without really doing the stuff on the map that much. So there are really different ways that you can play this game. And that's not to say that either of those ways are like guaranteed wins either. Like I could try and do that income strategy again and just I could only do it because so many of the action tiles came out that boosted income that I was able to do it that time. But if I tried to force that every game, there's no way. You've got to roll with it, and maybe the next game you've just got to be energizing like crazy and the next game doing something else.
Yeah, it really feels like there isn't one strategy. It is very much based on what is available and what the end games and what the contracts and everything put together leads to and how you can make the most of it. And really there's a lot of efficiency in it as well, because you often are trying to like stretch out your turns as often as possible to try and get those stars before the next time that you have to like energize or if you like that efficiency puzzle and the being able to try new things every game, then this could be a good fit. But I would recommend if you try it once and you found it frustrating, but you think all of that sounds interesting, to play it again. But with all of that being said, we do think this is one of the better games of 2023. I think you think right now might be leading the way for you, but I'm not too sure. It's really up there though. We really like it.
Yeah, this is in the mix for me. I don't know if it's hard to say what my leader is right now. This is going to be a tough year, but yeah, this is in the mix, and I could see this being the top of quite a few lists this year. And that is it. Thank you so much for watching. We didn't even mention the box either. I really like this box.
Yeah, I love the vibrant green, and the booth they had at Essen was amazing. Everyone had great vibrant green hair and like Nucleum energy drinks. But thank you so much for watching. Please let us know in the comments if you've played Nucleum or what some of your favorite heavier games of 2023 have been. And as usual, please like, subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you next time for another game.